The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning in the year 2247. It came through channels that humanity had only recently learned to use, carried on frequencies that their scientists barely understood. The words were simple, translated into perfect English by technology far beyond anything Earth possessed. The Galactic Council requested the presence of human representatives at their capital world. Humanity was being considered for membership among the stars. Commander Jack Holloway stood on the bridge of the Starfire and watched Earth grow smaller in the rear viewports. The blue marble that held everything humanity had ever known was now just a bright dot among millions of others. He was 43 years old, a veteran of the Mars conflicts and the first commander chosen to lead Earth's most advanced vessel into deep space. The weight of 8 billion hopes pressed down on his shoulders. The Starfire was humanity's pride. 3 years of global cooperation had built her. Every nation had contributed something. She was fast, she was strong, and she carried the best crew Earth could offer. But Jack knew the truth that kept him awake at night. Compared to what waited out there, the Starfire was a wooden boat sailing into an ocean of steel giants. Dr. Katie Monroe spent most of her time in the ship's small library, studying everything humanity knew about the Galactic Council. She was 31, with tired eyes and steady hands. Her job was to speak for Earth, to find the right words that would open doors rather than close them. She had learned 7 alien languages in the past year. She had memorized protocols and customs and taboos. But the more she learned, the more she realized how little humanity actually knew. The Council had existed for 50,000 years. 12 species sat at its head, ancient races that had mastered the stars when humans were still learning to use fire. They had rules for everything. They had seen hundreds of species rise and fall. And now, for reasons nobody quite understood, they had invited humanity to their table. Lieutenant Danny Vance did not trust the invitation. He sat in the tactical center, running simulations that always ended badly, and asked questions that nobody wanted to hear. Why now? Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 5 years ago. Most species waited centuries before the Council even acknowledged their existence. Some waited thousands of years. But humanity had received an invitation almost immediately. "It doesn't make sense," Danny said during one of their evening briefings. "We're nobody. We're children playing with toys we don't understand. Why would they care about us?" Jack had no answer. Katie had theories, but none of them felt right. The truth was that nobody knew what the Council wanted. They could only hope that it was something good. The journey to Nexera Prime took 3 weeks. The Starfire's engines pushed through dimensions that human minds could barely comprehend, crossing distances that would have taken conventional ships thousands of years. During those weeks, the crew trained and prepared and tried not to think about what waited at the end. Captain Megan Cole led the ship's fighter squadron. She was small and quiet, with short dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her pilots loved her because she never asked them to do anything she wouldn't do herself. She spent the journey running combat drills, preparing for trouble that she hoped would never come. But Megan had learned long ago that hope was not a strategy. When they finally arrived at Nexera Prime, the crew gathered at the viewports and fell silent. The planet was enormous, wrapped in bands of purple and gold clouds. Massive stations orbited around it, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Ships of impossible size moved between them, their design so alien that human eyes struggled to make sense of them. "My God," someone whispered. "We really are children." The docking process took hours. Council officials scanned the Starfire from end to end, cataloging everything aboard. They were polite but cold, efficient but distant. Jack noticed that none of them smiled. None of them seemed curious about the humans at all. They processed the Starfire like they had processed 1,000 ships before, Following procedures that had been established before humanity existed, Ambassador Krivax was different. He met the human delegation at the docking bay, a tall reptilian figure with scales that shifted between green and blue. His eyes were large and golden, and they held something that Jack almost recognized as warmth. He welcomed them in perfect English and led them through corridors of glass and light. "You must be careful here," Krivax said quietly as they walked. "The Council sees everything. They judge everything. And they have already formed opinions about your species." Katie frowned. "What kind of opinions?" Krivax hesitated. "You are young. You are aggressive. You have a history of violence against yourselves. Many here believe that inviting you was a mistake." "Then why were we invited?" Jack asked. The ambassador did not answer. He simply led them forward through halls filled with alien artwork and technology that seemed more like magic. They passed beings of every shape and size. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others floated or crawled or moved in ways that defied description. All of them stopped to stare at the humans passing by. Jack kept his face calm, but inside he felt the weight of those stares. They were not curious looks. They were not friendly. They were the looks of beings watching something small and strange, something that did not belong. The Grand Chamber was the largest room Jack had ever seen. It rose hundreds of meters high, its walls covered with screens that showed stars and planets and the faces of billions of watching aliens. 12 platforms circled the center, each one holding a throne for one of the High Arbiters. And in the center, small and exposed, stood a single platform for the humans. High Arbiter Xyloth rose from his throne. He was ancient, his gray skin stretched tight over a skull that seemed too large for his body. His eyes were black and empty, holding no warmth at all. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber and across the galaxy. "This session will be broadcast to every inhabited world," Xyloth announced. "Let all species witness the evaluation of humanity." Katie stepped forward, ready to begin her prepared speech. But something in Xyloth's voice stopped her. Something in the way the other arbiters leaned forward, eager and waiting. Something in the silence that fell over the chamber like a shroud. Jack felt cold. He looked at Danny, saw the same fear reflected in his eyes. They had walked into something. They just didn't know what yet. And across the galaxy, trillions of beings settled in to watch. The screens around the Grand Chamber flickered to life. Images appeared, familiar images, images of Earth. Jack recognized them immediately. Battlefields, burning cities, mushroom clouds rising over broken lands. The history of human violence, displayed for the entire galaxy to see. High Arbiter Xyloth's voice was cold and steady. "We present evidence regarding the species known as humanity. Evidence gathered over 200 years of careful observation. Let all who watch understand what we are dealing with." Katie watched in horror as the images continued. World wars played out in terrible detail. Genocides were shown without mercy. Humans killing humans over and over, for reasons that seem petty and small when displayed on screens larger than buildings. The chamber was silent except for Xyloth's narration, explaining each act of violence like a teacher explaining a simple lesson. "They are barely 2 centuries removed from using primitive explosives against their own kind," Xyloth said. "They have destroyed their own environment for profit. They have created weapons capable of ending all life on their world. And they have used them." Danny's hands curled into fists at his sides. He wanted to speak, to defend humanity, to explain that those wars had taught them lessons, that they had grown beyond such violence. But the protocols were clear. They could not speak until invited. And Xyloth showed no sign of inviting them. The images changed. They became stranger, more clinical. Laboratory settings. Sterile rooms. And in those rooms, Jack saw humans. Men and women and children, trapped in cages, watched by alien observers. His blood turned to ice. To properly evaluate the human species, Xyloth continued, the Council authorized a behavioral study program. Over the past 2 centuries, 312 human subjects were collected for detailed examination. Collected. The word hung in the air like poison. Jack thought of the missing persons reports, the ships that had vanished without trace, the people who had simply disappeared over the decades. They hadn't been lost. They had been taken. The footage showed everything. Humans subjected to pain tests, their screams recorded and measured. Humans deprived of food and water to test their survival limits. Humans injected with diseases to study their immune responses. Children separated from parents and watched as they cried themselves to silence. Katie fell to her knees. She couldn't look away. She couldn't close her eyes. The faces on the screens were human faces, twisted in pain, crying for help that never came. Some of them she recognized from old missing persons files. Some of them were still children. The results were consistent, Xyloth said. Humans display remarkable physical resilience. They can endure pain that would kill most species. They can survive injuries that should be fatal. And most concerning of all, they never stop fighting. New footage appeared. Combat trials. Humans placed in arenas with alien predators, creatures designed for killing. The humans had no weapons, no armor, nothing but their bare hands and their desperate will to survive. And still, some of them won. They fought with rocks and teeth and broken bones. They fought until they couldn't stand. And even then, some of them kept crawling forward. Even when facing certain death, Xyloth said, they attack. They do not submit. They do not accept defeat. They are, by every measure, the most dangerous species ever catalogued. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Aliens turned to each other, fear and disgust clear on their alien faces. Jack could hear fragments of conversation, translated by his earpiece. Monsters, animals, threat. The words cut deeper than any weapon. But Jack noticed something else. Something the Council hadn't intended. The footage didn't just show human violence. It showed human courage. It showed men dying to protect women. It showed women dying to protect children. It showed humans sharing their last scraps of food with strangers. It showed them holding hands in the dark, singing songs to keep their spirits alive, refusing to let their captors break them. The Council saw monsters. Jack saw heroes. Xyloth raised his hand, and the footage stopped. The screens went dark. The chamber fell silent. The High Arbiter looked down at the human delegation with something that might have been pity. But based on this evidence, he announced, the Council has reached a verdict. Humanity is deemed too dangerous for integration into galactic society. Effective immediately, the Sol system is under permanent quarantine. Any human vessel found outside designated boundaries will be destroyed without warning. This decision is final. The chamber exploded in applause. Alien hands clapped and alien voices cheered. They were celebrating. They were celebrating the imprisonment of an entire species, the torture of innocence, the theft of human lives. Danny couldn't take it anymore. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. You kidnapped our people. You tortured children. And you call us dangerous? Guards moved toward him, but Jack stepped in front of his lieutenant. Stand down, Danny. Not here. Not like this. Katie rose to her feet, tears streaming down her face. May I speak? She asked, her voice barely steady. Xyloth tilted his head, curious. You may. Katie looked around the chamber at the thousands of alien faces watching her. Then she looked directly at Xyloth. You showed the galaxy our worst moments, our wars, our failures. and you use them to justify your own crimes. But you forgot something. And what is that? You showed them that we endure. You showed them that we fight. You showed them that nothing you did could break us. Katie's voice grew stronger. You think you've condemned us, but all you've done is show the galaxy what humanity is capable of. Xyloth smiled, cold and empty. Brave words from a condemned species. Take them to their ship. They leave within the hour. The guards surrounded the delegation. Jack took one last look at the High Arbiters, memorizing their faces. He would remember them. And somehow, someday, they would answer for what they had done. As they were led away, Krivax fell into step beside them. His voice was barely a whisper. That broadcast went to every inhabited world. Billions saw what the Council did to your people. Not everyone approved. Remember that when the time comes. Jack nodded slightly. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Council had just made a terrible mistake. And on Earth, 8 billion humans watched the screens go dark. They had seen their people tortured. They had seen their children crying in alien cages. They had seen their species condemned without trial. In homes and streets and public squares, humanity watched. They did not scream. They did not riot. They simply watched and remembered, and felt something ancient and terrible rise up from the deepest parts of their souls. The Council had wanted to break humanity's spirit. Instead, they had united it. The silence lasted 3 days. Across Earth, people went through the motions of normal life. They worked. They ate. They slept. But beneath the surface, something was changing. Something old and powerful was waking up. On the 4th day, Admiral Nathan Brooks stood before the United Earth Assembly. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from every nation. Presidents and prime ministers sat beside dictators and kings. Old enemies shared benches without complaint. The petty divisions that had defined human history seemed small now, meaningless. Brooks was 62 years old. His hair was gray, and his face was lined with decades of service. He had fought in 3 wars and buried more friends than he could count. He had seen humanity at its worst and at its best. And he had never, in all his years, seen anything like this moment. "You have all seen the broadcast," he began. His voice was quiet. He did not shout or pound the table. He simply spoke, and every person in the hall listened. "You have seen what they did to our people. 312 souls, men and women and children, taken from their homes, tortured in laboratories, used as test subjects for alien curiosity." He paused. The silence was absolute. The Council expects us to accept this. They expect us to return to our quarantine and live out our days in our little corner of the galaxy. They expect us to be afraid. Brooks looked around the hall. He met the eyes of leaders who had spent their careers opposing each other. And in every pair of eyes, he saw the same thing. The same cold, quiet fury. "I am not asking for revenge," Brooks continued. "Revenge is hot and blind and wasteful. What I am asking for is justice. For the people they took. For the people they broke. For every human who will never come home because the Council decided we were convenient test subjects." He straightened his shoulders. "I am requesting full mobilization of Earth's military and industrial capacity. I am requesting the authority to build a fleet capable of reaching Nextera Prime. I am requesting permission to bring our people home." The vote was unanimous. Not a single nation opposed. Not a single voice dissented. For the first time in human history, humanity spoke with one voice, and then the work began. Factories that had been building cars began building ships. Mines that had been extracting iron for buildings began extracting it for armor. Scientists who had been working on medicine began working on weapons. Engineers who had been designing bridges began designing engines. Every resource humanity possessed was redirected to a single purpose. Every hand that could work was put to use. Every mind that could think was given a problem to solve. The entire planet transformed into a war machine, working day and night, driven by something deeper than fear or anger. They worked because they remembered the faces on those screens. They worked because somewhere out there, some of those people might still be alive. They worked because the galaxy had told them they were small and weak and dangerous. And humanity intended to prove at least one of those things correct. Meanwhile, the Starfire waited in orbit around Nextra Prime. The Council had given them permission to leave, but Jack Holloway refused. His ship was damaged. His crew was exhausted. But he was not going anywhere until he received orders from Earth. Those orders came on the 15th day. Hold position. The message read, "Do not engage. Do not provoke. Reinforcements are coming. Make them think you are broken. Make them think you have given up. And when our ships arrive, make them regret every moment of cruelty they have ever inflicted." Jack showed the message to his senior officers. Katie read it 3 times, hope flickering in her tired eyes. Danny laughed, a harsh and bitter sound. Megan simply nodded, as if she had expected nothing less. "How long?" Megan asked. The message didn't say weeks, maybe months. "We just have to hold on." They settled in to wait. The Council ignored them, confident that the single human ship posed no threat. General Thurak's Dominion fleet patrolled the system, hundreds of warships designed to crush any resistance. The humans were surrounded, outnumbered, outgunned, but they were not defeated. Krivax visited them in secret, bringing food and information. He told them about the cracks forming in the Council's alliance. Several species had protested the treatment of the human captives. Some had even called for investigations. The broadcast had not shown the galaxy what the Council wanted. It had shown them something else entirely. They saw humans fighting impossible odds and refusing to surrender, Krivax said. They saw your people caring for each other even in the worst conditions. Many of us have lived under the Council's rule for thousands of years. We have forgotten what it means to fight back. Jack studied the ambassador's face. "Why are you helping us?" "Because my species once had fire like yours. We once believed that we could change things. The Council broke us long ago. But when I watched your people on those screens, I remembered what we used to be." Krivax's golden eyes gleamed. "If you survive what is coming, you will need allies. And there are many who would stand with you if they believed it was possible." The weeks passed slowly. The crew trained and prepared and waited. They repaired what they could. They memorized fleet positions. They ran simulations against odds that should have been hopeless dot and across the galaxy. Hidden from Council sensors, 200 human warships gathered in the darkness between stars. They were not as advanced as Council vessels. They were not as elegant or efficient. But they were built with human hands and human determination. And they carried crews who had watched the same broadcast as everyone else. On the Starfire, Danny Vance stared at his tactical screens and smiled grimly. The Council had made a mistake common to ancient powers everywhere. They had assumed that because they were old and strong, they would always be old and strong. They had forgotten that new things could grow quickly. They had forgotten that desperation breeds innovation. They had forgotten what humans could do when they were angry. Across Earth, the final ships were completed. Engines were tested. Weapons were loaded. Crews said goodbye to their families and walked aboard their vessels with steady steps. Admiral Brooks watched the fleet assemble from his command ship. 200 vessels built in weeks, crewed by volunteers who knew they might not come back. It wasn't enough. By any rational calculation, it wasn't nearly enough. But Brooks had learned something his long career. Sometimes, when everything seems impossible, you just have to try anyway. Sometimes, the only path forward is straight through the wall. He opened a channel to the fleet. You know why we're here. You know what's waiting for us. I won't make speeches about glory or destiny. I'll only say this. Our people are out there. Some of them might still be alive. We're going to get them back. And anyone who stands in our way is going to learn what humanity is really capable of. The fleet responded with silence. No cheers, no battle cries. Just grim, focused determination. Brooks gave the order. 200 ships vanished into faster than light, racing toward Nexera Prime. Earth's answer was on its way. General Thurak stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the lone human vessel with amusement. 500 warships under his command, the finest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled, and his target was a single damaged carrier that could barely hold position. He had waited long enough. The Council wanted the humans removed from their space, and Thurak was happy to oblige. He opened a broadcast channel, making sure every ship in his fleet could hear. Human vessel, you have overstayed your welcome. You will power down your engines and surrender immediately. Your crew will be taken into custody for processing. Resist, and you will be destroyed. You have 30 seconds to comply. On the Starfire, Commander Jack Holloway listened to the ultimatum with a calm face. His crew watched him, waiting for orders. Katie stood nearby, her hands clasped together. Danny had his fingers on the tactical controls. Megan was already walking toward the hangar bay. Jack opened a response channel. He spoke a single word. No. Thurak, as amusement faded. Very well. All ships, open fire. The Dominion fleet unleashed hell. Energy weapons that could melt mountains lanced across the void. Missiles that could crack planets streaked toward the lone human ship. The space around the Starfire turned into a storm of death. But Jack had anticipated this moment for weeks. The Starfire's engines roared to life, pushing the ship out of the main firing line. Point defense systems activated, filling the space with countermeasures. And from the hangar bays, Megan Cole's fighter squadron launched into the chaos. All pilots, spread formation, Megan ordered. Don't give them easy targets. Hit fast, hit hard, keep moving. The fighters scattered into the Dominion fleet like wasps attacking an elephant. They were tiny compared to the massive warships, barely worth noticing. But Megan's pilots had spent weeks studying Council tactics. They knew where the weak points were. They knew where to hurt. The first Dominion cruiser lost its sensor array to a precision strike. The second lost its engine cooling system. The fighters didn't try to destroy the enemy ships. They crippled them, blinded them, turned them into obstacles for their own fleet. Thurak frowned at his tactical display. His ships were getting in each other's way, trying to track targets that moved too fast and flew too close. Human pilots were diving between his vessels, using them as shields against their own weapons. Tighten formation, he ordered. Focus fire on the carrier. The Starfire shuddered under the assault. Armor plates vaporized. Hull breaches opened and sealed. Fires erupted and were smothered. Jack gripped his command chair as his ship screamed around him. Shields at 40%, Danny reported. We can't take much more of this. Hold the line, Jack said. Just a little longer. In the fighter squadron, Megan watched her pilots die. One by one, they were caught by enemy fire, their small ships exploding into brief flowers of flame. She had started with 50 fighters. She was down to 30, then 20, then 10. All remaining pilots, form up on me, she ordered. We're going for the flagship. It was suicide. Everyone knew it. But they followed her anyway, because that was what humans did. They pointed their damaged fighters at the massive Dominion command ship and pushed their engines to maximum. Thurak watched the tiny squadron approaching and laughed. Foolish creatures. They throw their lives away for nothing. Then his proximity alarm screamed. Space itself seemed to tear open. Ships appeared from nowhere. Dozens of them, hundreds of them, dropping out of faster-than-light directly into the battle zone. Human ships. Earth ships. 200 vessels, their weapons already charging, their crews already at battle stations. Admiral Brooks' voice echoed across all frequencies. This is the United Earth Fleet. We are here for our people. All of them. Living or dead. Move aside or be moved. Thurak's laughter died. His tactical display was suddenly filled with enemy signatures. The human ships were smaller than his, less advanced, but they were everywhere. And they were attacking with a ferocity he had never seen. Human tactics made no sense to him. They flew directly into his formations, taking damage that should have been fatal, refusing to break off even when their ships were burning. They rammed crippled vessels into his cruisers. They ejected crews and then piloted their empty ships on suicide runs. They fought like beings who had already accepted death and decided to take as many enemies with them as possible. All ships, concentrate fire on the largest targets, Thurak ordered. But his fleet was fragmenting, each captain fighting their own battle. Their neat formations dissolved into chaos. On the Starfire, Jack watched the battle unfold with fierce pride. Earth's fleet was outnumbered more than 2-1. They were outgunned and outclassed. But they were winning. Danny, target the flagship's engine section. Everything we've got. Yes, sir. The Starfire's main weapons fired. The beam cut across space, joined by fire from a dozen other human ships. Thurak's flagship shuddered. Its engines flickered and died. The general stared at his screens in disbelief. His shields were failing. His ship was losing power. Human vessels were surrounding him, their weapons locked on his bridge. A calm voice came over the communication channel. Admiral Brooks. General Thurak. You have a choice. Surrender now, and your crew will be treated fairly. Continue fighting, and you will die here. You have 30 seconds to decide. Thurak's hands trembled with rage. The Dominion had never surrendered. Never. For 50,000 years, they had been the Council's sword, crushing every threat, enforcing every decree. The idea of surrender to these primitive creatures was unthinkable. All ships, he broadcast to his remaining fleet. Focus everything on that carrier. Destroy the Starfire. Destroy them all. The Dominion ships tried to obey, but they were broken, scattered, their coordination destroyed by human tactics they couldn't counter. More of them fell with each passing minute. On the Starfire's bridge, Katie watched the Dominion cruiser explode. Then another. Then another. The enemy fleet was crumbling. They're retreating, she whispered. They're actually retreating. Thurak refused to run. His flagship was dying around him, but he stood on his bridge and screamed orders that no one could follow. Human ships surrounded him. Human weapons were pointed at his heart. Admiral Brooks' voice came one final time. Your time is up, General. The coordinated strike came from every direction. Thurak's flagship vanished in a ball of fire, taking the general and his pride with it. The sight broke something in the remaining Dominion captains. One by one, they turned their ships and fled, abandoning the battle, abandoning their fallen comrades. Jack slumped back in his chair, exhaustion washing over him. Around him, his crew was crying and laughing and hugging each other. The Starfire was a wreck. Half his fighters were gone, but they were alive. Against all odds, they were alive. Megan's voice came over the radio, tired but steady. Starfire, this is Cole. Remaining squadron standing by for orders. Come home, Megan. Bring our people home. The battle was over. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Galactic Council's military had been defeated. The news spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by 1,000 broadcasts. Repeated by 1 trillion voices. The humans had won, and on Nexera Prime, the 12 High Arbiters watched their screens in stunned silence. The impossible had happened. Everything they believed about their power, their security, their place in the universe, was suddenly uncertain. The age of the Council was ending. The age of humanity was about to begin. The human fleet surrounded Nexera Prime like a ring of steel. 200 ships, battered and scarred but victorious, held position around the Council's capital. Below them, trillions of aliens looked up at the sky and wondered what would happen next. Commander Jack Holloway stood on the bridge of the Starfire and prepared to speak. His ship had barely survived the battle. Half the systems were offline. The hull was more patches than original metal. But the communication array still worked, and that was all he needed. "Citizens of the Galactic Council," he broadcast, his voice reaching every corner of Nexera Prime and beyond. "My name is Commander Jack Holloway. I speak for the United Earth Fleet. I speak for humanity." In the Grand Chamber, the 12 High Arbiters listened in stunned silence. Their guards stood ready, but there was nothing to fight. The humans hadn't landed troops. They hadn't bombarded the planet. They simply waited, their weapons pointed at the heart of galactic civilization. "You showed the galaxy what you did to our people," Jack continued. "You thought it would prove that humans are dangerous. You were right. We are dangerous. But we are only dangerous to those who harm the innocent. We are only dangerous to those who mistake kindness for weakness." High Arbiter Xyloth gripped the arms of his throne. His black eyes were fixed on the screens, watching the human ships that had torn apart his fleet. He had never known fear, not in 10,000 years of life. But he felt something now, something cold and unfamiliar. "We have 3 demands," Jack said. "First, the immediate release of all surviving human captives. We know you still hold 147 of our people. We want them returned, unharmed, within 24 hours. In the holding facilities beneath the Council complex, human prisoners looked up at speakers they couldn't see. Some of them had been held for decades. Some barely remembered what Earth looked like. They had survived things that would have broken most species. And now, impossibly, someone had come for them. Second, the identification and surrender of every individual involved in the abduction and experimentation. Program, scientists, guards, administrators, everyone who participated in the torture of our people will face human justice. Xyloth rose from his throne. "This is outrageous. The Council does not answer to primitive species. We do not negotiate with threats." Jack's voice remained calm. "Third, the complete and permanent dissolution of the Galactic Council's authority over humanity. We will never be your subjects. We will never be your test specimens. We will never accept the rule of beings who torture children in the name of science." "Impossible," Xyloth declared. "The Council has governed this galaxy for 50,000 years. We will not be dictated to by creatures who just learned to leave their own planet. Our fleets will crush you. Our allies will bury you. This rebellion ends now." Admiral Brooks' voice cut in, cold and precise. "High Arbiter, look at your tactical displays. Look at what remains of your fleet. Then look at the moon to your left." Xyloth turned to the screens. The moon in question was small and barren, uninhabited, worthless. As he watched, a single missile streaked toward it from the human fleet. The impact was visible from the planet's surface. The moon cracked. Fault lines spread across its face like broken glass. And then, slowly, it broke apart. "That was a warning," Brooks said. "Humanity doesn't give second ones." The chamber erupted in chaos. 3 of the 12 species immediately announced their withdrawal from the Council alliance. They had seen enough. They had no desire to share the fate of that shattered moon. 4 more demanded Xylos's immediate resignation, calling his leadership a catastrophic failure within hours. The council that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years was tearing itself. APART Dr. Katie Monroe led the team that recovered the surviving captives. 147 humans emerging from cells and laboratories into sunlight they hadn't seen in years. Many couldn't walk on their own. Some couldn't speak. But all of them were going home. Katie held the hand of an elderly woman who had been taken as a young girl 70 years ago. The woman looked up at the sky, at the human ships that filled it, and began to cry. "You came," she whispered. "After all this time. You actually came." "We never stopped looking," Katie told her. "We never forgot." The trials began within days. Council scientists who had participated in the experiments were identified and detained. Some tried to flee. Some tried to bargain. None escaped. Humanity kept detailed records. Humanity had excellent memories. And humanity was very, very patient. Ambassador Krivak stood before the human fleet commanders with a formal proposal. His species and 6 others wished to form an alliance with Earth. They had lived under the Council's shadow for too long. They had watched the broadcasts, seen what humans could endure, seen what humans could achieve when pushed too far. "Your species is something we lost long ago," Krivak told Admiral Brooks. "The fire that refuses to die. We would like to stand beside that fire, if you will have us." Brooks looked at Jack, who looked at Katie, who looked at the faces of the rescued captives watching from nearby. They had every reason to reject the aliens. Every reason to turn inward, to build walls, to trust no one beyond their own kind. But that wasn't what humanity did. "We accept," Brooks said. "But understand this, in our alliance, we don't torture. We don't experiment on the innocent. We don't condemn species without trial. If you stand with us, you stand for something better." Krivak bowed his head. "We understand. We accept. And we are honored." The Terran Accord was established before the month was over. 8 species united under a new banner, built on principles that the old council had abandoned long ago. Humanity didn't lead because they demanded power. They led because someone had to, and they were the only ones willing to do what was necessary. On Earth, Admiral Brooks addressed the people one final time. He stood on a platform overlooking a crowd of millions, with billions more watching across the planet. Behind him, the rescued captives sat in places of honor. Some were in wheelchairs. Some were on crutches. All of them were home. "They thought they could break us with cruelty," Brooks said. "They thought they could shame us with our own history. They thought that showing the galaxy our wars and our failures would prove we were monsters." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "But they forgot something about humanity. We don't just survive our history. We learn from it. We grow. We become better. And when someone hurts our people, we make sure they understand their mistake." The crowd was silent, listening. The council is broken. Their fleet is scattered. Their authority is gone. But we're not done. Out there, across the galaxy, there are species still living in fear, still suffering under the rule of tyrants, still waiting for someone to tell them that they don't have to accept cruelty as normal. Brooks straightened his shoulders. Humanity is going to be that someone. Not because we're conquerors. Not because we want power. But because we remember what it feels like to be small and afraid. We remember what it means to fight against impossible odds. And we will never ever stand by while innocents suffer. The applause began slowly, then grew into a roar that seemed to shake the very ground. Across Earth, people who had watched their children taken, their neighbors tortured, their species condemned, stood together and cheered. They had been tested. They had been broken. They had been told they were nothing but violent animals unworthy of the stars, and they had answered high above. The human fleet maintained its vigil. Ships that had been built in weeks by determined hands now carried the hopes of 8 species. Their mission was no longer survival. Their mission was justice. The galaxy had changed forever. The old order had fallen, and in its place, something new was rising. Katie Monroe stood on the observation deck of a rebuilt Starfire, watching stars drift past. Somewhere out there were species she had never met, worlds she had never seen, possibilities she could barely imagine. The universe was vast and dangerous and full of wonders, and humanity was part of it now. Not as beggars asking for acceptance, not as prisoners in quarantine, but as guardians, as protectors, as the fire that refused to be extinguished. She thought about the faces in those broadcasts. The tortured, the broken, the lost. She thought about the ones who had made it home and the ones who never would. She thought about what humanity had paid for its place among the stars, and she made a silent promise to all of them. Never again. The stars stretched out before her, infinite and waiting. And for the first time in her life, Katie Monroe was not afraid. Humanity had found its purpose. Humanity had found its strength, and the galaxy would never be the same.